Our panel tonight is here to talk about surviving and delivering IT in the COVID-19 crisis. And I'm in the process of promoting the panel to the screen right now, and then I will ask them to introduce themselves. You see that Bob has already been promoted to the panel. So why don't you get started, introduce yourself, and I will be promoting the other panelists here post tense.
Thanks, Tony. Hi, everybody. Bob Leake, newly installed secretary. This went a lot different than many other initiations I've been through, but I really appreciate the care that has gone into this installation tonight. I did also want to thank Vanderhouen for what's in this cup. My invoice will be coming soon. And I'm Bob Leake. I am the Chief Information Officer and the Director of County Assets for Multnomah County. I've been with the county for about 6 years after 10 years at Kaiser and previous roles at Banfield, the Pet Hospital, and with Egghead, all here in this area, and then various other industries and things that I've done in my past. Very happy to be here tonight. Looking forward to sharing some information on the county's perspective around the COVID crisis, and to potentially tee up a little bit of thought for what the future might hold for us. So thanks.
And you see that Mark has made it to the stage. Mark Farley, how about introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Mark Farley. I'm a group vice president with Thermo Fisher Scientific. For those of you who aren't familiar with Thermo Fisher, we're essentially one of the world leaders in serving science. And the COVID challenge is particularly interesting for us because the company has a lot of breadth. So our analytical instrument segment, a lot of the protein and the virus images that you see come off of our electron microscopes. Our life science research teams are active in the genome and the sequencing of that, the clinical diagnostics in terms of providing test kits, testing apparatus, lab products, and personal protective equipment. And then we also do medicine development and production. So talking to all the stakeholders in terms of how can we support antiviral treatment and vaccine research. So we're involved in that side, and then of course I'm trying to take care of a pretty large business group, all my stakeholders, and then across the company, fostering collaboration and other solutions for the globe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And John.
Great. Hi, Tony. Hi, everybody. John Kochavir. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Portland General Electric. So we provide electrical power to about half of the state of Oregon, which amounts to a little over 2 million people. So I've been with the company for a couple of years. I'm excited to be here today. And I'm excited to share with you some of the impacts of COVID on our business, as well as some of the work that we're doing to support our employees and our customers. So great to be here.
Thanks, John. And last member of our panel is Frank. Frank, would you introduce yourself and let everybody know about yourself?
Excellent. Yes, thank you for inviting me to this. My name is, again, it's Frank Trovato. I'm a research director for the Infotech Research Group, and we provide research and consulting services to a wide range of clients in different industries. Tony asked us to give a kind of brief opening statement around how we've adapted to COVID-19. And I'll have to say that our response has been not that difficult because we are, in our organization, we are used to working remotely. What I have found interesting is how the clients we support have quickly transitioned from that initial response, getting their staff set up to work remotely, to sustaining operations, even optimizing business process with better and better technology solutions.
Well, thank you, Frank, and thanks for introducing yourselves, gentlemen. And I was hoping that you would do an initial opening statement, your opening salvo of how you, as a leader in IT and professional information manager, how you're dealing with COVID, what stands out to you as important priorities and strategies. You know, take about 2 or 3 minutes most as you make your comments, make them super good, and then we're going to start taking questions. So let's start with the same order we went. How about you, Bob?
Great, thanks. So, you know, we play a unique role in local government, and we have been preparing for issues through our disaster preparedness plans, and we're really ready for an earthquake, a fire, a event downtown, let's say a significant civic activity that we've seen over the past couple of years. We were ready for all of that. What we had not practiced and what we weren't prepared for was a global pandemic. But I would say we weren't prepared from page 3 or 4 of our disaster preparedness plans. We spun up in about 8 weeks ago now, the beginnings of our Emergency Operations Center. And about the beginning of January, we're beginning to get information from the Oregon Health Authority and the other governmental agencies that had the early warning around what things were looking like coming out of China specifically, but also Asia, and some of the early indicators that this might be a bigger problem. So we went from a kind of a cautious activation to a partial activation to a full activation, and we've been fully working through that for the last 8 weeks. There's 130 people in our enterprise, in our Emergency Operations Center. We adopted several years ago the federal structures around incident management. The state, both Oregon, Idaho, California, and Washington all follow the same basic framework and structure. And so when we're on the phone with other organizations, we speak a shared language. We're able to share resources and information with each other. And page 4 is where we started filling in now what we would call our pandemic response capabilities. Couple of stats that I wanted to share. The community has really reached out to us. We've received 30,000 N95 mask donations. We've received 40,000 non-N95 mask donations. We've received 500,000 gloves in donation. And so those are some of the things that you've heard about in the media regarding shortages and those sorts of things. The role that we play at the county is as the public health authority. And so what you hear about in the Portland market with respect to testing, positive tests, hospitalizations, the activity that's happening through the hospital system, all comes through a department, the health department with the county. We are the local authority. We're the ones that are advising the public on what to do and not to do. So that's kind of the macro context of things. With my last 60 seconds, I want to talk specifically about the 5,000 plus employees, contractors, and other volunteers that are working for the county. In about a 10-day period, we swung 3,500 people from showing up in the office to working from home. We did that because the county has been very forward thinking, and some of you have heard me talk about this, with cloud adoption, with cloud capabilities. I'm thankful that we had replaced our SAP system with Workday about 2 years ago. We had implemented Duo from authentication and protection of our networks and systems about 3 months ago. We were doing that. And so we've been preparing for the need to work remotely. And I'm happy to say that all of that is up and running. And I can share some additional things through the Q&A. But if there's any message I wanted to leave in this opening statement, it's that your local government understands its critical role in providing for the capability for us to be safe, follow the orders that have been provided, and know that the county's open for business. And so I'll leave it at that and turn it over to the other panelists.
Thank you. Go for it, Mark.
Yeah, so I think I'll echo a few of Bob's comments at the beginning. We started with, you know, a somewhat formed business continuity approach. However, I don't think that anybody had ever really thought through what this type of pandemic situation was going to entail. And we jumped on this about the time it hit China, because we have a large amount of business that comes out of China. There's a lot of semiconductor and other interests that are in the Wuhan region. And we started to learn some lessons there. And it became pretty apparent pretty quickly that we were going to need to do some work to be able to mitigate the types of actions that were likely to be necessary. And that, that included, expanding our VPN infrastructure by about 6 times to accommodate, as many as 60, 70,000 people and contractors working from home. I talked to WebEx I talk to their executive management on a daily basis, as we've expanded to pretty close to 100 million minutes or so a month of total utilization across our platforms, which significantly stretches even the most robust capability. And even some of our cloud partners are, like Amazon, are starting to ration resources within that. So, working through the infrastructure, setting up security, updating a lot of our policies to address this, deploying thousands of laptops to people who need them around the globe who weren't in a remote working environment was a challenge, to be sure. And then, of course, creating all the communications materials, and getting out information so people can learn about how to effectively work in these conditions, for our management, how to manage those people has been a huge challenge. And then I think externally to our customers, we needed to ramp capability of things like test kits from, tens of thousands to millions in almost no period of time. So scaling the supply chain, figuring out how do we get millions of orders of PPE and other equipment to our customers that are out there, shifting to a 24/7 work production schedule across many of our factories while still maintaining the safety of our employees, and a lot of the other pieces was huge. And then also figuring out from a service and even commercial perspective, how do we take care of our existing customers? Learning to do remote demonstrations, getting our application scientists connected to customers where we need them, deploying remote services to customers who essentially closed their sites due to concerns, but we're still running production like a lot of the pharma companies, presented challenges that we'd never even thought about. So we had a lot of good capabilities in place, but it's certainly been a challenge as we've gone through that. And we see it as really a critical mission for us, not only to take care of our colleagues inside of our business, but we're trying to get the right materials out there to take care of the world.
Great. Hey, again, John Kochavir, Portland General Electric. I'd echo kind of what Bob and Mark said. So being an essential service here, providing electricity for half of the state, we had a lot of plans in place, but I think it's one thing when you have them written down or when you do tabletop exercises, it's very different to execute in real life. So for PGE, what we've done is we stood up an incident management team in the middle of February when we started really hearing the scaling of COVID-19. And like Bob, we had spent a couple of years installing some cloud technologies. We went to Workday ourselves on the HR side recently. We use Microsoft Teams. So within really a 2-week period, we sent 2/3 of the company home. The other third of our employees are in the field. So they're linemen that are climbing poles and literally keeping the lights on for the Oregon community. Our call center, we set up a virtual call center in 2 weeks. So we had call center agents literally take their dual monitors and their desktops to their homes. So we've got 260 of our 275 customer operations team members working from home. Fortunately, we haven't seen any drop in service levels, which is terrific. And of course, we're doing a bunch of stuff to keep our employees safe, whether they're with masks or deep cleanings. We've restricted access to some of our critical offices. We're doing temperature checks now for these critical employees. So there's a lot, I think, that's gone on over the last several weeks. I will tell you just our observation in terms of what's happening in the service territory. We're seeing loads are down, generally speaking. I don't think that's a surprise with the closure of bars and restaurants and the increased vacancies within hotels and the stay-at-home order with more people working from home. That being said, while commercial load is down, residential load is up. Again, probably not surprising. We're all probably doing more work from our homes now, now that we're working from home. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. We look at places like Italy, in the peak of what they're going through, electricity load was down something like 20%. So I think we're all anxiously awaiting to see when this stay-at-home order is going to get lifted. And last I heard, I think the governor said that she's waiting for 10 consecutive days of no COVID-19 deaths. So I think all of us at PGE, and I'm sure all of us on the phone here, are hoping for the best for the Oregon community.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and much like the other panelists have mentioned regarding starting to get on top of this early on as you start to see the signs back in January, February. We were in a similar position, and I actually am one of the directors that manages business continuity, disaster recovery, crisis management. So I'm heavily involved in that area. So of course, we're very much aware of what the implications could be, and we were certainly kind of warning our clients to beef up their business continuity plans. Get ready for the possibility of a pandemic. What I've found interesting from a business continuity perspective is that a lot of the same solutions that we would recommend organizations put in place for facility disruption, which again would include enabling staff to work remotely, came into play here as well. Now, obviously, it's not a completely similar situation to if your building burned down or if there's a gas leak or what have you. There's other implications. You can't just relocate to a hotel conference room or what have you. It's all work from home, so that has presented challenges. But what I've certainly heard from our clients is when they had their PCP ready and when they had plans in place for facility disruption, they had a much easier time transitioning to the work from home setup. So that I found that really interesting, in that yes, you do want to build out a pandemic response plan, but I think this has really affirmed that if you have a really good solid business continuity plan that puts you 80% of the way there when these unexpected events happen. The other thing I want to just talk about is just the strain this has put on IT. Certainly, as again, as the other panelists have alluded to, I think it was Bob mentioned you had to ramp up like 5,000 people or something like that in short order. And I've heard that story over and over again, and just incredible what IT departments have pulled off in a week or two that normally takes multiple weeks to accomplish. And now, that's the downside, obviously, that you've been under the gun and put in a lot of hours. What I'm seeing now too, though, is that it's actually an opportunity for IT to really shine and demonstrate their value in a much more tangible way. Business users naturally take IT services for granted. I mean, you expect your applications to just work, you expect your network to just work, and so on. But now, everyone recognized that things were different. Suddenly, I'm trying to work from home, not in the office, and so IT has been directly involved in making sure the business can actually operate in a much more visible way. And as I said earlier, not only now moving on from just getting you set up to actually optimizing your work environment and rolling out more collaboration tools and in accelerating going paperless for departments like finance that don't typically go very paperless. And so I'm seeing that IT is now they're past that curve and really shining in the business right now, and accelerating a lot of future thinking IT innovation.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate the opening. Interesting times. I want to remind all the listeners that this is a participation event. You will notice that there is a live chat going on, and you can all participate in that. And there is the Q&A panel. We are starting to get some questions. And you can also raise your hand and feel free to do that. And you can join us here on the conference panel. So I'm going to start with the first questions as they're rolling in. And I'm just, if they're directed at somebody, I will say that, but otherwise I'll direct it to everybody, and you can raise your hand, panel, or just jump in as appropriate. Is your organization's technology ready to mitigate the risks associated with the disruption caused by the COVID event? If not, what steps were taken as things unfolded over the last few weeks, and how are you addressing it for the future? So the question is, how are you addressing mitigation of risks? Whether you're doing that formally or informally. And if not, what steps were taken to pay attention to it as the weeks unfolded? Who wants to take that on?
Well, maybe Tony, I'll start. John Kochavir here. I would say for PGE, I think for our office workers, I think the technology has gone a long way to allow people to work from home. But to the extent you're in a business where you've got individuals in the field that have to do physical work, I think that's a challenge. So, for example, we've got restrictions with the number of people that can ride in a vehicle, right? And so, if there's individuals that are sitting next to each other, we've got folks that will sit on opposite ends of the car. So you got the driver, and then maybe the back seat on the passenger side. But you got to roll more trucks if you need more people, because you can't put, let's say, 4 people in a vehicle. So I think there's different challenges that we've seen, and you've got to put some different mitigations in place for, to address some of those challenges. So I would say for the typical office worker, I think the technology works great. And I think culturally, this is something that's going to stick well beyond this pandemic. But for the folks in the field, we spend a lot of time thinking about them and how we can protect those employees.
I'll jump in next, and in just speaking for Infotech Research Group and what we've done. Like I mentioned at the top, that the transition to work remotely, generally speaking, was not that difficult. But one area, again, because of the type of work that we do, but one area that was challenging is one of the services that we provide is on-site workshops, and of course we're not traveling right now, and probably won't be for a while. So we've always toyed with the idea of running online workshops, and we resisted that because ideally there's more interaction, kind of hands-on and so on. But of course we're being pushed into new territory, like a lot of organizations, and it's actually going quite well. So I think that's so the risk that we had again was that we can't travel, and what do we do? And now we're getting past that by embracing the online world a little bit more, online collaboration, more beyond just the 1 or 2 hour meetings, but actually facilitating a 4-day workshop over Teams or Zoom or whatever the tool of choice is. And again, I see some positives coming out of this from a technology point of view.
Yeah, I'd throw in maybe one comment. Remote work and work from home is obviously huge for us, but what we discovered was many of the needs were somewhat unique needs, right? We would, in some cases, we had people take home desktops and then call us up and say, how do you make the wireless on this work? And there's no wireless adapter in it. One of the surveys we ran, one of the smaller but still common themes was people asking us, can we please upgrade their home internet, right? Because it's not working. And the whack-a-mole that is conferencing, has presented some pretty substantial challenges for our service desks and a lot of the others. So, in the process of teaching people how to work from home, we've learned an entirely new science of how to provide IT services to many of our constituents. And the same is true, you know, to John's point about our field employees. We're learning some lessons there as well. And a lot of the technologies we built as a part of our digital transformation are proving to be invaluable to our response to, you know, these events and being able to take care of our customers. And that's given us an opportunity to really kind of double down on some of the thinking behind digital transformation.
Fantastic. Any other comments in regard to risk mitigation and steps being taken? Number two, and to everyone listening, raise your hand if you want to come on and ask your own question. You can see that there's dynamics happening in the chat. Next question. What do you see, this is a message to all the panelists, what do you see as the biggest challenges you're going to face in your world when the world starts to re-engage and you look to bring your workforce back in-house? How much thought are you giving that? And how are you, yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in here. So this is something we talked about at a conference that we hosted back before all this started. Again, foreseeing that this was going to be an issue, and you know, so now you've set up thousands of staff to work remotely that didn't work remotely before, and yeah, I think a lot of it's going to be a bit of a culture shock, and I think more at the senior management level or the executive level, where, you know, depending on the organization, you know, there's that feeling that my staff is not going to be productive unless they're in the office. You know, we can call that kind of old school thinking, traditional thinking, or in some cases might be very absolutely real and tangible, you know, evidence-based thinking. But whatever drives that, and I'm going to just say traditional model of I need, you know, my staff have to be at work, as being turned on its head, right? And if staff can show that they can be productive, in fact, more productive working from home, it's going to be tough to put that genie back in the bottle, right? I mean, where's the evidence now? If I've been more productive at home, where's the evidence that says I need to be in the office to do my job? So, you know, my recommendation is you embrace that, right? You embrace it, you make that part of your flexible work environment. It doesn't mean you have to work from home every single day. I don't think that's good either. But you know, it becomes a no cost or low cost perk you can give your staff to let them work 1 or 2 days a week from home. Just like, you know, embrace the other technologies that you've introduced through this. You know, the collaboration tools and so on. You know, embrace this, keep going forward. Don't go backwards.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just kind of piggyback on Frank's comment, and I think Mark had talked about this as well in terms of so many learnings. I'll tell you here at PGE, we were doing a very expensive multi-million-dollar renovation of one of our floors that we put on hold. And given the adoption of the remote work that we've seen over the last month, we're rethinking how we do that. And so we're thinking maybe we do more hoteling space versus dedicated office space. That would allow us to have fewer rooftops to support dedicated employee space if we can get some people to rotate. That being said, I think culturally, and I think I saw a question that came through in the chat or something around, you know, the mental health of employees. I will tell you, at least, you know, in office, there are some people that genuinely miss working with their coworkers. Now, it's a little crazy with, you know, maybe kids at home or working spouse or whatever, but, you know, we've encouraged different practices of doing regular stand-up meetings or virtual stand-up meetings and check-in. So I think the way that employees engage with one another, how managers engage with employees is going to change as well, which I think is terrific. It just advances us in terms of how we work with each other and with customers.
Yeah, we spent some time today passing along some information because remote working has not been a key aspect of how we've delivered our services for the 150 years that we've been around. There are pockets, right? We have field personnel, say the property tax assessors, parole officers that are meeting with their folks out in the field, all the work that we do with the homeless and houseless population. So it's not that remote working was a foreign concept to us, but there was a comfort and a sense of comfort in having a place to go and to be around your coworkers and those sorts of things. And I think I'm going to pull up here just on my own screen a quick little checklist that we're developing that I want to share a couple of highlights from. That we have gotten some information that there are some behaviors that are starting to manifest themselves, even though it's only been a few weeks now, where we've been in this new normal that we're working on. And I have a couple of comments about the new normal as well. I've seen some questions about that have been coming through. But what we have seen are things like it is easier to give negative feedback from a manager to an employee without the physical presence of the two people involved in that conversation. And so there have been some negative behaviors that have started to manifest itself where a manager might feel uncomfortable providing criticism of an employee, but they feel totally comfortable doing it over the phone or via video chat. And I don't know if that's because of the lack of physical proximity or the fear of striking out or something along those lines. But we're going to put some work together around and some guidance together around making sure that some of the bad behaviors that could happen aren't starting to happen with the remote workforce. There is a need for people to connect, and so managers need to take the time to explicitly set up connection time and to encourage it and to model that behavior. So for instance, I had a monthly optional all staff meeting. It's hard for me to get my 400 employees in one place together. And we've been doing remote dial-in and remote participation with that and broadcasting that for about 3 years. Now I've moved that to weekly and trying to take the opportunity to model behaviors around connecting with the staff. And I think lastly, the one that I saw out of the list is that we need to measure our employees on their output and not on their participation or their process or their time in a chair, so to speak. And that's really come to light with a couple of areas that we were slow to adopt. One is around telehealth, and the second is around parole officers meeting with their clients. What we have found now is that by shifting to telework, productivity levels have actually gone up. And so the model for our future thought is around if it is a proven science that a parole officer meeting with their clients reduces recidivism and creates a more productive member of society, and they're able to see 6 to 8 clients a day, if now they're more productive and they're able to complete more of those interactions, what if they double that? And it's not a vein, because we're not a for-profit business, about doing twice the work with half the people. It's to take all the people and do twice the work because of the positive impact that that could have. So those productivity measures, we're starting to think about in new and different ways. And again, we're only a few weeks into a couple of these examples, but I'll share a stat. The 2 weeks before the COVID crisis really started to manifest itself, on a typical week, we had about, on a typical day, we had about 950 patient interactions in our clinics and about 150 telehealth visits. The first week of the COVID response, as we shifted people to teleworking, we inverted that exactly. We had about 950 televisits and about 150 in-person visits. And so it's showing us that we're capable of delivering services in this new reality that we're working with. And I think it is going to set the stage for some really good conversations going forward.
Yeah, I'd echo Bob's sentiment. In many ways, for us, this has actually allowed us to get closer to our customers, right? Being able to do demos and connect application scientists to researchers and a lot of other work has been, pretty positive experience. We have a lot of really positive momentum there. I think it's going to change the way that we do training and a number of our services overall to our customers. So there's definitely some positive learnings here that we'll continue to take forward. I think my personal favorite though from this week is I did have one of our senior finance leaders call me up and say that he doesn't think we need quite so many big spreadsheets anymore. So it's definitely a win from the IT side.
There's definitely a number of questions and comments coming in terms of sort of trying to predict the future. And one of the questions I think I have, and it's formulated in some of the others, when it comes to the projections for normal operating businesses in all of our various enterprises, obviously those projections have changed. From a point of view of anticipating a return to normal, what are your guys, CFOs and other major planners looking to? What are their guiding principles for when this thing is going to end? I know that on the retail side, there's a certain perspective we're taking, but I'm interested in what perspective you guys are taking from an overall planning point of view. Are we looking at 3 months, 6 months? What's your planning prognosis?
Well, maybe Tony, I'll go on that one first. So for PGE, first of all, if we knew the answer to that question, I think we'd have a crystal ball that maybe nobody else had. But I think when we look at some of the reports from a JP Morgan or Bank of America Merrill Lynch, it looks like it's probably going to be in the first half of 2021. But you guys have seen the numbers. 3.3 million unemployment filings in the U.S. 3 weeks ago, and then 2 weeks ago it's another 6.6. You're at 10 million unemployed. Somebody told me that 1982 we had 790,000 filings for unemployment. So this is over an order of magnitude more than what we've seen in the history of this country. And when I think about Portland General Electric, we think about the impact to our customers, right? And so when you think about people paying their electric bills, right now we have suspended all disconnects due to non-payments. It's absolutely the right thing to do for our customers and for the residents of Oregon. But some of the things that we're going to be looking at is unemployment filings. We're going to be looking at the unemployment rate, and we're going to see loads, electricity loads. And we look at things like new connects. So are the new buildings going to continue to come up the way that they have over the last 11 years of economic growth? And so this is where we work with Bob's colleagues or Multnomah County. What permits are being filed right now? I think those are some of the leading indicators for us to see how quickly we can recover from what we've seen the economic impact been for COVID-19.
It is a difficult thing to predict. I'm going to let the other panelists answer the method you're using to try and predict or to build some planning infrastructure. I want to mention to everybody that we are getting great questions in the Q&A. Occasionally they're showing up in the chat. If you put them in the Q&A, we'll make sure we'll get to them, whereas in the chat they might get lost. And I also want to point out to the panelists that a couple of people are asking you direct questions in the Q&As. You're free to answer those yourself if they're asking you by name a question. I'm not going to present those to the board in general. So continue. Is there anyone else who wanted to address the planning question?
Yeah, I'll take a little bit. We exist in a lot of different markets. And so we've taken a couple of philosophies. So one, because we have a lot of activity in and around Asia, including China, is we're watching the signs coming out of Asia and how that's working very carefully in terms of what are the trends and and what's working, what's not working within those markets, and how does it impact business. China is probably it's not recovered, but it's on the path at this point, and you've got others like South Korea that have done a very effective job of managing the spread of the disease throughout their country, and they do an effective job of testing and continuing to monitor for it. So we look for those as some bellwether type of signs, and then I think each of our divisions has established a set of signals, as it were, that we look for in our markets to give us an indication of sort of when is the next coming, right? And then I don't think there's any magic formula to predict that, but we're trying to look for common signs within those markets of where we would see recovery, to what percentage are each of the segments recovering, and how do we best target taking care of our customers and really driving, if they need new solutions, making sure we're driving to their needs.
Yeah, I'll chime in. From a county perspective, there's a couple of thoughts that I had. One is I've been trying to find some space to think about what does next look like. And one of the concepts that came up is around this topic of the new normal. And so I sat back a little bit and gave some thought, and new normal has a definition, like most things do. It's the current state after a dramatic change has transpired. And it encourages one to deal with current situations rather than lamenting what could have been. And so, that's what it is going to be. And then what does it take in order to provide leadership for organizations to get there? And I had a little spark of inspiration, and I kind of picked on this word around transpired, and thought maybe what we need is transpirational leadership. That this is a new concept, that this event has happened. To get to the new normal is going to take leadership, new thoughts. A lot of us were involved in digital transformation work, and we've been doing that for a long time. But this transition state that we're going to go through could spark this transpirational, and I like that it kind of includes the word inspirational, which is a key role that many of us in our technology leadership roles play within our organizations. So I looked up transpirational leadership, and there's no definition for it. It's a new word. And out of that, though, the root of that is transpiration, which is the process by which water passes across a plant membrane. In other words, a very scientific method. And I thought, how about if there's an opportunity to apply some science and to create this transpirational leadership opportunity, what could that look like? And Brad Denny, who's on this event tonight and is a SIM member, and I talked a little bit, and we started to noodle some ideas, and I had a couple that I wanted to share with you all. And this isn't trying to take advantage of the situation in any nefarious way, but our real estate agents have called us and said, by the way, the real estate market is completely frozen. And we're headed down a path where some of you know that the library was planning on making some significant investments, and there's a bond that's headed for the November ballot to help get the public to support an expansion of the library services. What an incredible time for the county to be able to step into a market where the real estate acquisition costs or the remodeling costs for some of the work that we were planning on doing could be less, which means that we can get more for that same amount of money that we were considering and thinking about. I also thought, with gasoline prices depressed, and John, I wonder how you all are thinking about this too. We need about 1 million gallons a month of gasoline. What if I were to lock in some futures contracts around gasoline prices today, anticipating that the economic recovery is going to happen? And we're all students of Keynesian economics, where when demand goes up, what happens with pricing, right? And so are there opportunities, and isn't that what we're expected to do as executives, is to think about, and I'll use the words take advantage of the situation that we're in, but to do that in a very thoughtful and strategic way, and to find those things that we could be thinking about, which may then lead to different lines of business. I think back to an earlier question, what happens when all these employees come back to the workforce? I was thinking about, how is McMenamins re-onboard 3,000 people that they laid off? That was easy, right? Laying off 3,000 people, via a letter and an email and turning off their accounts. How do they bring 3,000 people back? That's an entire line of business that would overwhelm an HR team. So how are organizations stepping forward to think about what some of these new business opportunities could look like, and proactively reaching out and maybe pre-establishing some of those services or bringing on some new talent and new skills in order to do that? So I wanted to leave everybody on this, and we've got about 50 people that are participating, with this thought that says, every crisis tunity, that was another word that someone coined in my office, is an opportunity for us in leadership roles to think about what could be different. So I'll pause there and kind of let other panelists weigh in. But if that's something you'd like to talk with me more about, I would love to entertain a video call or a virtual happy hour, things like that. This is something that I'm really creating some space so that I can think about what can I do with the public's money, the stewardship that we provide for that, in rethinking some of the services in our new future.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and really well said, Bob. And you know, I think that echoes a lot of what we were saying earlier about this is actually an opportunity for IT to shine. IT is now at the forefront, very visible in directly enabling the business in a way that, you know, before is more behind the scenes. And I think that same kind of thinking does go across the business. I'll go back to the example with our organization. We're now, you know, delivering workshops online instead of on site. You know, clients are now going to get used to doing that. So now that becomes an opportunity for us. And, you know, we don't have to, I mean, it's a win-win, right? We don't have to travel, and the clients don't have to pay travel expenses, right? And so on. So there's opportunity there. And that's just one small example. But the other thing I wanted to comment on, just building on what everyone else had said about planning, and yeah, you know, that's certainly no one knows for sure when this will all be kind of back to normal, you know, quote unquote normal. But one thing we do know, and we're already seeing it, is the economic impact. I mean, that's not a secret. That's not news. But what I'll say is much like with, if you had a really good, strong business continuity plan, you were in a better position to transition to remote work and dealing with the pandemic. Similarly, if you have a very kind of budget conscious organization that you know, takes budget, you know, cost cutting seriously all the time, and that doesn't mean that's not just about layoffs. We know that layoffs are happening, and that's obviously really unfortunate. You know, that's terrible for, you know, all around for quite a number of people. But you know, that's not the only way to save money, right? And so if this is an opportunity to kind of get better at managing your budget, and you know, taking advantage of vendor discounts and so on. One thing I'll say is that what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is that vendors, they see too that they're losing market share, they're potentially losing business, so they're offering discounts. I mean, it's not that hard right now to get a break on whatever agreements you have now with large vendors, whether it's, you know, network service providers or what have you. It doesn't hurt right now to go and approach your key vendors and ask them for some help at this time, and they're being, you know, generally speaking, open to providing some discounts. So so look for cost savings opportunities besides, you know, laying off people.
So a lot of the questions are centered around the transition from regular operations to everybody being remote. Specifically, a number of folks are asking how you're supporting the technology efforts to keep everybody online. Do you have any specific programs to cover the costs? Are you offering any special assistance to your workforce? How are you dealing with the mere fact that not everybody is ready to go online and work at home?
Tony, maybe I'll start, you know, at PG, those individuals that can work from home, that are working from home. I think I saw a number of questions around, you know, bandwidth and how we're supporting them. I will tell you just interesting factoid in terms of service desk calls. What we found was when we started sending people home early in March, we saw a spike of service desk calls by probably 25%. And we had implemented ServiceNow last year. And what we've seen in the last week is that service desk calls are down 20%, and the usage of ServiceNow is up 100%. And so we were talking about some of the cultural changes. I think that's what we're seeing a little more, is that when people are working from home, for whatever reason, they prefer to just look up their own solutions versus when they're in the office and they're actually picking up the phone, calling our service desk. So I think that was kind of an interesting data point that I saw over the past week. And then in terms of like things like bandwidth, I mean, we send tips out And I'll just give you a few things. One is we've seen an increase of, I'm going to call it block traffic, right, from a cyber security perspective. I won't call them explicit attacks, but block traffic for us is up about 20% since the pandemic has come out. And so we send out tips, being careful of COVID-19, phishing emails, but also just, we subsidize mobile phones for people. So when you're in a house with kids that are doing distance learning with a working spouse, you run out of bandwidth. So to the extent that individuals have either a corporate funded mobile device, they can tether off of their phones, right? And I often do that because I've got 3 kids and my wife is online, and that helps to alleviate some of the bandwidth issues. Or from a cyber perspective, if I nerd out a little bit, we've done split tunneling. So on the VPN, so some of the traffic that goes to Microsoft just goes straight over the internet. It's secured, but it doesn't go through PGE VPN. And so those are some of the things that we've done to try and make for a better employee experience in our shop, at least.
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of the things that John said. We took very much a white glove approach as much as we could to taking care of our employees. And, our organization, almost overnight became kind of an omni-channel marketing organization. We significantly increased the use of chat within, being able to enable additional agents to take on the load. We did a lot of training. We did a lot of knowledge article publishing. We published a number of fairly extensive infographics on best practices to help people and track that. But we also saw, kind of surprisingly, a pretty significant rise in the use of tools like Yammer, where, we made sure we had people all the time in Teams channels, Yammer channels, and everything else, looking for people who needed help and encouraging them to help. And one of the really positive trends that comes out of that is we found that people who weren't IT people started helping people. And so, we got a lot of crowdsourced people who are coming in and really supporting that. It gives us a platform to send out things like, security alerts and bulletins and such in a different way. And the adoption of those techniques has helped us pretty much across the board in terms of how we do that. And we got an incredibly positive response to that. In fact, a more positive response than we would get during a normal support period. And we've deployed our site support and other resources to higher value add activities in supporting. So it's been a pretty positive experience, I think, from that side, and it's something we've paid an awful lot of attention to make sure that we got it right.
I'll share a quick story in terms of our support for our remote workforce. I felt it important, and I have accountability at the county for all of our facilities and our IT team and our fleet of vehicles. That comprises what we call county assets. I felt it important early to set an expectation that we're not staffed, nor did we want to put our staff at risk to do at-home visits to set up people's home workstations and home technologies. But we were willing to talk people through, take the blue plug and put it in the blue hole because of the consumerization of a lot of the products that have been done. The blue plug doesn't fit in the purple hole. Well, that's why there's a purple plug. And so we had some of those calls, and they've been fun to listen to. But our staff was very concerned about being dispatched to go to people's homes. And this is pre the face covering and masking guidance that came out on Friday from the CDC, which we've now rolled out. And I'm sure all of you have dealt with that this week as a key evolution of the guidance that's happening given the current situation. So I thought it important as an executive to set a proper expectation early on. Now we're working with our risk management folks, because one of the realities that we all have to deal with is, to the workers' comp world, telling somebody to work from home makes their home office a workplace. And that means that the risks associated with what we mitigate in the office with things like sit-stand desks, special chairs, ergonomic assessments, anti-fatigue mats, wrist guards for typing, glaring screen glare tools. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, right? Encouraging people to stand up and walk around. What we have recognized is that there's, in the vein of the crisis management around the COVID issue and now the response to that, we've now spun up in our weekly and daily meetings. How are we going to provide guidance to employees that they have an obligation to take care of themselves, right? Sitting at your coffee table hunched over a laptop for 6 hours a day, you would never do that in the office, one. And two, we create offices that don't require that. But if that's what people are experiencing and they end up with neck pain or back pain, the potential for risk and issues to the organization is real, because that stuff hasn't been set aside yet by the workers' comp organizations that are out there. And employees have the rights to a safe and healthy workplace, which now includes people's bedrooms and living rooms and kitchens and so forth. So that's been a big impact for us. One of our proactive approaches to that is to remind everyone about all of this. We have an entire set of internal web pages devoted to ergonomics, and we have an ergonomics assessment that people can do, and our risk management folks help to support that. So we're reminding everyone that they also have an obligation in this, but now they're calling us saying, well, I kind of need my desk chair. And I think they're, again, in the vein of a crisis tunity, what would it look like instead of me sending my staff to the potential risk of someone's home, that in the gig economy, having a jackrabbit come by my office and pick up someone's chair and get it to their house for a nominal fee, is that a new way to think about how we take advantage of this world that we've lived in, and what does that look like in the here and now and potentially going forward? And so those are some of the thoughts that we've had about supporting the remote workforce. Tony, at the risk of just keep going, there were a couple of things that I wanted to touch on just in the question list that are passionate for me. So I'm just going to take the microphone and do that. It's around the digital divide and the aspect of equity in society. Many of you have heard me talk about how the county had taken on an effort together with the city of Portland and the five East County areas to do a municipal broadband assessment. And I wish we were done. I wish maybe we were moving forward with closing that digital equity and digital access gap and the participation gap, which is what really is the problem. It's not access. As my friends at Comcast and CenturyLink remind me, there are programs for access. And I talked to Verizon and T-Mobile and AT&T and others. There are programs for access. Access is the entry point. What it is the lack of participation. And in our market, 1 out of 5 people don't have access to the internet to enable their participation in this economy that we had. With Governor Brown issuing there are not going to be schools the rest of this year, and distance learning is how this is going to be, I think that whole situation is being exacerbated. I've really watched and appreciated what Don Wolf has done with Portland Public Schools, and I know other school CIOs are doing this as well, where there is a program where they're getting Chromebooks to people. They're working on Wi-Fi hotspots. I know Don and Jeff Bear at the city and I we haven't talked together, but we've been communicating via various methods to say, let's keep the Wi-Fi hotspots up and running, maybe at our facilities, to at least provide an opportunity for people to connect. Because between us, we cover about 400 buildings in the county, and they happen to be pretty geographically dispersed. So that's at least a place to start to make a dent in some of the lack of access and participation. And so I think I wish we were 3 or 4 years from now, and maybe there would be that broadband or alternative methods by which to close this digital divide, but we're not. This is the reality and the situation that we find ourselves in. And so anything, and I guess this is a little bit of a plea to this membership, is if you're in a place where you think you can help us help either PPS or Multnomah Education Service District, MESD, which kind of serves as a clearinghouse for all of these public institutes in this area, beyond the county. This is Washington County, Clackamas, and Multnomah. I would be very happy to have a conversation with you about some creative ways in which we can get this technology into people's hands and into the kids' hands. Because the reality is that distance learning is how it's going to be for the balance of this year. And it's an acute need that we have now. And so that's a little bit of a plea, and I appreciate the bully pulpit to be able to do that.
No problem. There was there's a security concern as we all move to remote operations, and there's a question about that with regard to new security threats that you have identified or are in the business of identifying that are worthy of us talking about. Let's dive into the question of new security threats, things that you're seeing coming out of nowhere, or maybe old threats that are appearing in new ways.
Yeah, we focus pretty heavily on, pretty much a holistic security approach, but we're seeing a sharp uptick in phishing, most especially preying on people's fears. We routinely test our people. We've shifted some of that testing to be more COVID-related testing, simulated emails and such. And we're seeing some signs of potentially increased levels of fraud. Some very, very specific government-focused attacks that are going on out there. So, we continue to really push our employees to be incredibly mindful of this stuff, especially when they're working from home. We deployed a lot of endpoint protection down to our machines and such, but we have, I'd say, a little broader use of different types of technologies than we have previously. So it's something that's keeping our InfoSec teams busy, and we've reached out and connected pretty extensively to others in the healthcare market and similar life sciences markets to stay connected to others, which I think is really, really critical to understanding kind of what are the best practices, where are the trends, and how do we do that.
I'll add to that. I mean, certainly, as we all know, phishing attacks are a big concern. And there's really no silver bullet to this. I would echo a lot of what Mark said, in that you need a holistic security practice. It's it's prevention, it's being able to detect early, it's being able to contain early, and so on. It wasn't that long ago that ransomware was making the headlines every single week before COVID-19 hit. Well, that threat is still there, and it's still hitting organizations. And certainly, if you want to talk about ransomware as one example of the potential, impact of one of these viruses, again, there's no silver bullet. And if you're not already practicing good security with good, network segmentation and intrusion detection and all the usual, this is a good time to start and use this as a signal to go ahead and start to beef that up. I mean, part of the challenge is getting the buy-in from leadership. Sometimes we understand that. So I think it's in the mainstream media that there is increased security threat. Use this to create some awareness and drive some of those projects forward that you've always wanted to push forward from a security perspective.
And maybe, Frank, I'll add to that. I mean, in the spirit of, Bob, you call it crisis tunity, or in the proverbial spirit of never letting a good crisis go to waste. At PGE, the way that we think about cybersecurity is around broader resiliency. And so you heard some of the things that Frank talked about, whether it's mitigating a blast radius because of network segmentation, or deploying MFA or multi-factor authentication, which I know many of us have already done that. I think this all goes in service to resiliency, just the way that we're having this meeting right now online, because we can still communicate with one another through different technology mechanisms. And that investment in cyber, hopefully doesn't go down at all, or at least doesn't go down significantly. And I think this is a great narrative, I think, that all of us can use as IT leaders to continue maintaining that investment in resiliency, whether it be cyber or some natural disaster, or in this case, a pandemic.
That's great, guys. This is a very interesting information that you're putting out regarding, well, all these questions. I'm going to try and continue to encourage members to raise their hand or ask questions. From a, Jeff is asking, from an IT management procurement best technology perspective, the COVID has put an online collaboration tools in the spotlight. Our own IT manager sent out a note this week banning Zoom due to security concerns, yet here we are. What's your opinion of where this technology is heading right now that it's center stage? And I'll add my own 2 cents that we're all becoming very, very short-term dependent on a tool that very, very, very few of us had even in our technology portfolios. Open up the conversation to all the panel members about this new introduction of Zoom, video conferencing, how that's working for you. And what's the responsible, as Chris asked, what's the responsible assessment of an IT leader regarding this new technology right now?
I'll kick this one off. Because we're a healthcare company, we're a public safety agency, we're a law enforcement organization, we're accountable to PCI and other laws. We have 120,000 kids in our database with the library. I mean, there isn't an aspect of regulated data that we don't touch on. We have developed and had developed standards. And a lot of this is based on the laws and the regulations, the interpretations that have existed. So with healthcare, we have a business associate agreement with Google and with Cisco for the WebEx platforms. Zoom wouldn't sign one with us. And so we made a very simple declaration a couple of years ago and said, you can't use Zoom for any healthcare interaction. And that wasn't good enough, because if Zoom was still available for someone, we guarantee that somebody was using it in a way that was non-compliant with that guideline. And so we attempted to prevent Zoom from being used. Here's the problem. Zoom is used by a very large segment of the population to initiate an interaction with a care provider or a parole officer or other things. And so these security and privacy concerns that have come to light over the last couple of weeks on the Zoom platform particularly have caused us to have to pause and say, okay, so our updated guidance is you can't initiate a call using Zoom, but if somebody calls you with Zoom, just know here are the risks that you fall under. And I think this is one of these evolving worlds. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes. And I know the Zoom CEO was supposed to be on one of the NPR programs today. I'm really interested in catching how he is positioning his organization, because I think they're under threat. If everyone stops using Zoom, what happens to Zoom's business? And then what happens to the market share for Google, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, and the other collaboration tools that are available? So I'm really curious to see how he answered the question around the threat to his business, that the media has picked up on this aspect of Zoom as a non-secure platform. But for tonight's thing, I'm not sure, outside of how people feel about whether we've been Zoom bombed or someone may be attending that isn't supposed to be. I think the security measures, Tony, you and Lydia and others put in place with only sending the link out today and those sorts of things, I think that's table stakes. You have to do that. We do that for Google and we do that for WebEx, which is the two endorsed platforms. But I think the comment around this new world that we live in with these online collaboration tools, I think it's going to evolve, and it's going to evolve quickly.
Yeah, I'll add to the conversation here, and yeah, I think this goes back to a couple of things. First off, certainly some clients that I've talked to have been more or less coerced into from business leaders to go ahead and set up Zoom for their organizations, because that's what the business wanted, and because of the urgency of the situation, there wasn't the normal time to evaluate tools and so on and so forth. So the reality is that there are going to be some of these rollouts that aren't necessarily ideal long term, but at some point we need to kind of go back and reconcile these tools, which leads to the second point I wanted to make is we already have a problem with I mean, when I say we, organizations in general, with too many different collaboration tools and that overlap, and that becomes a problem for IT to support. It becomes a problem for users. They don't know which tool they should be using, and have to have 5 different kinds of chat windows open because it might be hit on Jabber or Teams or what have you. So I think it's important that while right now there might be some immediate rollout of tools like Zoom, to as soon as possible rein that in and start to kind of rationalize your collaboration tools like you would do with your other applications, determine which ones are the best fit for the organizations and and back that one and start to phase out the others. You need some good education and marketing around that because people have their favorite tools. And the third thing I'll say is it's also important that as we're deciding which tools we're going to back, which ones we're going to phase out, we need to go back to kind of basic, project planning, actually defining requirements. Let's understand what the business requirements are and what's the best solution for that need. It can't just be, well, I've used Zoom a lot and I really like it. It's got to be what are the specific requirements, and that can help make a more objective decision around what should be kept and what should be phased out. So this doesn't get too out of hand for IT and users alike.
Yeah, I think we've followed fairly similar advice to where Frank is at. We've had the Microsoft tool suite in for a long time, so we do have people who've adopted Teams. Microsoft strategy of kind of keeping Skype alongside Teams has created its own set of confusion in terms of what we're doing. But we've gotten adoption there, and we've used WebEx for a long time, and we're in communication on. Basically, I'm in communication on a daily basis with WebEx. All of the platforms are incredibly stressed right now. The types of things we hear from both Microsoft and WebEx in terms of the amount of infrastructure they're scaling in the last 3 weeks is just unbelievable. As they look to ramp their platforms, I think Zoom's taken an even bigger jump in that same time frame, which is of course exposed some of the weak spots. But we put out a pretty extensive education campaign to our teams in terms of some general advice on what tools to use in what situations, similar to Bob's approach, and what works well. And then we kind of monitor on the back end through some of the endpoint tools and everything else, what's actually being used out in the environment, so we understand what's really going on across the enterprise. But for the most part, we've gotten good adoption by educating our people and taking a proactive approach to we're really truly here to help, right? Here's some tips and tricks that work. Here's some things that don't. Here's how you can maybe use the tools to better interact with customers or colleagues, all the way down to here's the do's and don'ts of how to do a digital meeting, how to manage more remotely. And that's driven a lot of very positive sentiment from both our management as well as our colleagues across the company. And we continue to work on it because none of them are perfect, and we do have quality issues, and we continue to try and increase the transparency around how we're managing quality and keeping people connected.
And I'll just add, I concur with all the other panelists on this, and so I'll just give you a different lens that we think about. As we go through this high usage of online collaboration tools, one thing that I think a lot about is how sticky these are going to become, right? And so I mentioned we use Microsoft Teams, and so I think Mark, you may have mentioned Yammer, and we've got people using SharePoint. And the reality is with Microsoft 365 now, I guess that's the new brand. They know what we're doing and what's stickiest in that product line because it's all cloud-based. And so one of the things that we're looking at doing is really piloting an alternative. So like a G Suite, for example, because my sense is that some of these larger providers, when you're up for renewal and they see how sticky this has become, you're going to get an escalator. What I mean is a price escalator. And if you don't have an alternative, look out, because then you're just going to have to eat it. So I think something to be mindful of, at least, is as we're going through this, just know that it's important to have alternatives if you plan on negotiating with your supplier or vendor when your renewal is due.
We are beginning to run up against our time limit, but I do want to try and get a couple of other interesting questions in. One is reverting back to, the digital divide, and the question was kind of, do you know of resources that IT and other leadership can get that can help the lower underprivileged workforce who aren't necessarily outfitted and need the assistance to maybe upgrade their bandwidth or buy a computer? Do any of you know directly of ways to help out in that way? Or what are your thoughts about that?
I saw this question come up too, and I had responded to Jennifer. I'm happy to do some follow-up and see if I can circle back around and provide some links to some of that. I know we donate about 1,000 pieces of equipment a year to Free Geek. They called us and said, stop sending stuff. We are overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed in both getting stuff out of Free Geek because they're giving away a lot of equipment right now, and the donations have completely overwhelmed them. And they're just around the corner from us in Southeast Portland, near where our office is. So I thought as a takeaway, I can do a little bit of research and see what I can find in terms of other programs. And this particular one was around the issue that foster families have in continuing to provide connectivity between foster kids and their biological parents, given all the social distancing and lack of travel and those sorts of things. I mean, that's a heart-rending use case, and it's something that I feel that I want to do a little bit of follow-up on.
Great. I feel that was a really important and good question for us to connect on, so I wanted to bring that up. That is the type of thing we're looking to get assistance for each other in our membership. So thank you for the question. Thank you for the answer. And then we are starting to run down. There is a general question that Brad brought up, and I'll open it up to the board. And then I'm going to promote our SIM presidents back up to the panel. And then the general question I'd like to put out to everyone is Brad's open question of, what are the very good opportunities, positive outcomes that you are beginning to obviously see and beginning to plan for? And I'll read his question directly. What would you say are the intangible feel-good things that can take away from these hard times, coming together, special messages, etc.? And for my own self, to augment the question, I am absolutely blown away that we are able to move into a remote place and handle this epidemic the way we are. 10 years ago, not so much. Everyone's been able to move relatively quickly, and a lot of that has to do with the advances in our very profession and the work we do as IT professionals. So I think it's super fantastic. And from a retail e-commerce perspective, we are learning tons every single day as we deliver our software and continue to do so. So I'm interested in the panels and the board members' perspective as we close the meeting. What are the positive aspects? What are the wins? What are the silver linings? And what are the opportunities you guys are perceiving and following? And I'm going to open it up to the panel in general.
I'll kick this off, and one of the positive, I mean, and you know, I've already talked about the technology opportunity, so I want to kind of focus on another angle here. One of the positives that I've seen is the way a lot of employers have really stepped up in terms of how they're taking care of their people, and that's been a big focus. Certainly, that's something I've seen with most of my clients, and certainly Infotech itself. You know, acknowledging the fact that you're working from home, but you might also have little kids. Now, I'm not in that situation, but some of my colleagues have very young children, you know, 1, 2 years old, and you can't put them on a schedule, right? And so, you know, being flexible enough to say, look, as someone said earlier, it's not about the hours in the chair, it's about the output in terms of getting your work done. And it doesn't have to be 9 to 5. It can be, you know, in 2-hour shifts as you trade off with your partner who's taking care of the baby. And seeing this organization, I think that's increased the respect and the trust between employee and employer, and organizations where that's been handled really well. And I'd say that's really positive outcome.
Yeah, and maybe I'll go next. I think I concur with Frank's comments. So I'll tell you on a personal perspective, I spend more time with my family in the last month than I maybe than I would over the course of a month or a quarter. And there's and I think you got to look at the silver lining in that. That being said, there's going to be I think things are going to get tougher before they get better. And so the silver lining here, I think. Is just the role of technology. None of what we're doing right now happens without technology, and our business doesn't function without technology. And I think an event like this really highlights that. And I think that all of us have as big a seats at our boardroom tables as we ever have. I think we have as big a credibility as we ever have, and I think that's an opportunity we should take advantage of. So if that's crisis opportunity or not letting a good crisis go to waste, let's make the most of this to continue transforming our organizations.
Yeah, I think I'd add from my perspective, being on somewhat in the middle of some of this, the pace of science that's gone on from the point of really being able to get near atomic level imaging, the protein structures, the genetic sequencing, ramping testing capability, all the way out to delivering solutions to people has been unbelievable. And I think that's in large part because of the incredible collaboration between different entities, scientists, researchers, across the globe, in really responding to this. It's been, fascinating to watch the progression and to see how fast these things are moving on a daily basis, and how society's been able to adapt. And I completely agree. I think the role of technology, the role of IT in some of these things has been, really, crucial to the movement and the speed and the pace. And I've been incredibly proud of my teams in terms of how they've stepped up to this, how they've really taken on the challenge. I say thank you quite a lot to them, because we live in some pretty hard times. And personally, again, I'd echo the sentiment. Spending time with my family and not being on the road 150,000 miles a year and such has been definitely a silver lining. But for society, I think that the emphasis of this is placed on research. The emphasis of this places on healthcare, and the priority changes and such that we're going to make here, and the role that technology has played in enabling that is going to be. I think it's going to change a lot of things in the future.
Yeah, I'm amazed at the resilience of people. Throwing this at the entire population of the earth and seeing the reactions and how all of this has been happening, it's unprecedented, right? What was the other scenario that anybody would have thought of? I think it's alien invasion would probably be the other world-altering event that could have happened. And I think I've been amazed at the resilience of people. I'm also very conscious about the divide that exists between the haves and the have-nots that's coming to light. And I think that story is yet to be told and yet to be written. And so if you don't have or haven't had an equity aspect to the work that you're doing, I think now would be a great time to introduce that concept and to talk through that. I think remembering that a significant portion of the population don't have the capability to participate and haven't for a long time. And I think there was a comment earlier around, this is the one event, I think, where our infrastructure is still up and running still. And I think that, the ability to access and to have meetings like this, all the remote collaboration tools, the fact that our Emergency Operations Center is up and running in our brand new building that wasn't designed to be an EOC, but can take advantage of all the modernization and workplace things that we had done. I just think there's example after example after example of how fortunate we are that this is the event that has occurred at this place in technology capability. And I completely agree with John and Mark around the place at the table that we have. So leaning into that and not letting this opportunity go by to say, you know what, I know my IT budget was going to go up by 4%, but I really need to go up by 8 or 10 or 12, because that is how to accelerate the work that we have going on. And so I so appreciate the opportunity to tell a little bit of the story here tonight about what the county is doing, because most of you live in this county, and just know that we're doing the best that we can and have really been focused on those that don't have the same advantages that many others have. And again, I'm happy to talk in more detail with anyone if they want to reach out. So thank you for allowing me to be here tonight.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have a small amount of time. We are done at 7:15. I want to point out that Ashish had a question that went unanswered. We're going to get back to you, Ashish. I've requested any last minute hands being raised. I don't see any. I'm going to say my closing words. We are practicing and learning here at SIM programs, and this is our first effort of this type. And so we welcome all feedback and all comments and all ways to improve. We are going to continue to try and reach out and stay in contact and provide as much opportunity to collaborate and to interact with each other as we can. So keep an eye out for new program opportunities. And I really want to say thanks for the people that helped do this and the panel members. Normally we'd be giving you a bottle of wine, but unfortunately it would be COVID-ridden, or Corona-ridden, so we will not be able to do that. So they're not in the mail. But we very much appreciate your expertise, your knowledge, and for the attendees at large, we will follow up this meeting with an email that will formally close out our conversation. There may be a link or two in there provided by the panelists. So if you are interested to see more from them, look for that follow-up email. Additionally, obviously, you can reach out to any of us and we will connect with you, because that's what it's all about. So I'm going to hand it over to Richard and Mark, the outgoing and incoming presidents, to close out with whatever notes you'd like to leave tonight's meeting on. And the question that was left on the table was, what are the positive outcomes that you're looking forward to yielding from this crisis?
Okay, well, I'll kick it off. Tony, thank you. I would like to certainly acknowledge the folks that put this together. We also had help from SIM National, providing us with the Zoom webinar feature. And I'm certainly looking forward to leveraging this technology more. So I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to close with, but that's my bit.
Yeah, this is Mark. I switched phones. Yeah, I'd also like to thank our outgoing board members. We didn't mention earlier, Bud Borgia and Jeff Kruger. They had served on the board for a while, Bud in particular. And we really want to thank them for their participation while I was president, and wish them well. And hopefully they'll be continued SIM members. Thank you to everybody on the panel for joining us today. It was very, very enlightening.
Well, with that, we'll close out and say goodnight and end the conference. Please shoot us any feedback, follow-up questions, anything we can do to be supporting you. Thanks, panelists. Thanks, board members. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Lydia, for being behind the scenes and helping us make it happen. See you guys.